Да, садись.
В центр садись.
Да ладно, ладно. Это...
Ну ты же главный.
Да ладно, я главный. Это, там не написано, что я главный. И вообще это...
Сейчас напишем.
Ну давайте поговорим.
Инициатор,
Давайте просто поговорим. Нет. Или как? Или можно, чтобы каждый сказал, как лучше?
Ну, каждый скажет, а
А
потом...
потом некого дискуссии.
Давай.
We continue our work in the UCMC. The topic of the next event is the challenges for Ukrainian financial system in 2017. Our guests are Tymofiy Mylovanov, honorary president of Kyiv School of Economics, Yuriy Repko, expert of the Center for Economic Strategy, Vitaliy Shapran, member of the USFA, and Yuriy Prozorov, president of the USFA. The first one is Mr. Mylovanov. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, for coming. And today we will try to talk about important issues. After that, we will try to organize a discussion on what are the challenges for Ukrainian financial system in Ukraine, how they could be addressed. We will focus our attention on systemic issues, not on some cases, individuals, on what was happening yesterday, but about how Ukraine could move forward in the financial system today. And I am concerned with one problem. Unfortunately, I believe it is important, and we don't see many discussions on that topic. There was a big inflation, there was a big devaluation in our country, and we had quite a problematic situation with banks. Half of banks in the last 2.5 years disappeared from the market, half of them are still there. From about 200 banks in the past, we now have 100, but top 40 control 96 or 97% of the market. As to the stability of banks, I am interested in such a question. We know, and that's public information, that in those banks' portfolio, there are NPLs, up to 50% of them, non-performing loans. And for example, the position of the USA in 2030, 100 days will change in regard of Ukraine. Maybe Russia will understand, will realize that Ukraine could be challenged by some external or internal shock. Is financial banking system of Ukraine crossed that line, after which we can say that if there is a shock, we will be able to survive? That is a question that concerns me a lot. And another question is inflation, hryvnia stability, and exchange rate, and accumulated reserves. If there is another shock, do we have enough stability to survive it? And how we can ensure that we survive? And another issue is crediting economy. Who should we credit? We believe that there is certain liquidity accumulated in the banks. Even the interest rates are going down. But which business they provide loans to? We know that maybe just agricultural sector, small and medium-sized enterprises, they have very big problems with loans, and the banks do not want to provide loans to some sectors. And I would like to ask these questions more than explain what my position is. And now I would like to give the floor to Maria. The first question is interesting. I did not expect it, but I have something to say. As a financial analyst that has worked in the capital markets for more than 10 years, I believe that the way to address this issue is diversification. Any business that invests, its normal reaction is diversify the assets. If the investor, the bank, keeps all the eggs in one basket, invests all money into one sector, into one company, into one country, then they have the risks. Our banking system is operating in such a way that only foreign banks, which have mother companies abroad, they are more or less secured from this operational risk. The banks which operate only in Ukraine, they have that problem with eggs in one basket. They provide loans only to Ukrainian business. Their assets are concentrated only in Ukraine. And talking about operational risks, they will not be able to do anything with these risks. And if there is diversification of loans, of the portfolios, if these banks become regional banks, and they will have assets in some other countries, maybe Georgia, Moldova, Baltic states, only then they will have some strength. And I believe that the bank cannot accumulate capital which will be half of their assets. Then the bank will not be able to operate. It's not its basic business model. And that is why the answer is to diversify. Is it possible in current conditions? I believe that's more long-term question. As to inflation, devaluation, and other things, my main idea is we need to preserve the policy of flexible exchange rate. For many years we were fixing the exchange rate, and then it would collapse, and that led to a shock, to a crisis. That was the policy that led to certain distortions in trade balance and the balance of payment. If till 2008 the trade balance deficit was financed via external borrowings of the private sector, but after the crisis, this deficit of the trading balance is financed at the expense of state borrowings. The state is accumulating the debt for which it will have to pay a lot. We already pay about 5% of the GDP for that, and part was financed via burning currency reserves. That was the price for fixing the hryvnia rate. That was stagnation of export production and the increase of the state debt, of the public debt. We cannot go back to the policy of fixed rate. That is one of the major threats for the country, and not to allow the return to that, but because of the populism now, because of those people who demand the loans at 5 or 8%, for example, the law that was passed on Mikhailivsky Bank, that is a big threat, and we would like to rescue Ukraine from that. And I'm trying to do it. Another threat is the printing of money of banknotes without any control. Now there are several opinions. I will give the floor to my colleagues and they will tell about that from some other point of view. There are ideas to print money, to provide privileged loans to domestic producers to support domestic economy at a low rate. And what we will see is that the hryvnia cash mass will increase, and having the black market, which is 10 times more than the official market, there will be no problem to buy dollars for these hryvnias, and that will be happening because people are not investing into production, and the money which will be channeled to sort of support domestic producer, they may find their way to currency market, and that will cause devaluation. Will it lead to economic growth? This is a big question for me, and I don't think it will happen, because I see the statistics on investments into the non-banking sector, and now when the National Bank has currency restrictions, this statistical data is not very good. No one is investing into real sector of economy. The investments are very small, even compared to 2010, 2011. People do not see any future for their business in Ukraine. They see many risks related to many factors, starting from judicial system, war with Russia, and down to some complicated administering of taxes. By just printing money, the problems will not be addressed. We had a survey and 200 respondents who are real foreign and Ukrainian investors. They said that the people have concerns with the judiciary system, with the war with Russia, and the administering of taxes and actions of the tax inspection, and as to currency control. These are main things which do not allow people to invest. If these four things are not addressed systemically, then any taking money, bringing money to the economy, especially if a civil servant decides who to give the loan to, this will have more negative than positive impact. What was the last question, Tymofiy? Currency liberalization. For 2 years we've been talking about currency liberalization, and here we also were discussing it. Unfortunately, the interpreters cannot hear the comments. Yeah, people are leaving. Those who can, they go abroad. For 2 years we've been discussing this option of currency liberalization. There are many questions here. One of the main ones, Paul Krugman said that currency limitations should not replace the reforms. They should not be something permanent. This is the instrument of protection, short-term instrument of protecting from shocks. But that is what has been lasting here since 1993. People cannot invest abroad, and the companies cannot hedge their currency risk, because that leads to huge problems. And currency control has the 5th place in the factors in the answers to the question why people do not invest into Ukraine. This influences the activity of everyone, from small business, from individual who can invest money into real estate or Ukrainian bank, or just keeping it at home in dollars. These currency limitations, they influence the development of economy.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I will start. We have some achievements this year. We can make some conclusions. We reached macro stability. We create an environment for the revival of the economy. The inflation is at 12% rate and 10–12% of the valuation. So these are not bad indicators concerning the state of banks and real economy. Second, the National Bank succeeded, and we know that there is excessive liquidity, and we see at the same time the decrease of rates starting spring 2016. If we are speaking about figures, I remind that on 1st October the liquidity was 3 times more. Current liquidity is 2 times. Short-term liquidity of the system on average was 1.5 more than it is necessary. In 3 months in a row, we see 4 drop. It decreased from 80 to 60%, so 20 points. This is a big decrease. And we see the fall of rates in 2016. As of today, the National Bank decreased the rate 7 times, from 22 down to 14%. So maybe it just reflected the trends of the market, but due to our monitoring, we see that in 55 banks, the rates fell 22 average down to 17, and in dollars 7.5 decreased to 2.5%. So these are the results that indicate that those recipes provided by our foreign partners, they work here, but slower when we want it to work. So Brutto portfolio of Ukrainian banks was assessed of 99 billion. This is including reserve. And now, in October, the portfolio is about 995 billion. And if we look at it, we see that Krishchatik Bank and a number of other banks, this is an open information, they are out of the market, and we see that we have less banks, solvent banks, and we see that statistics of the third quarter shows that crediting restarted and the activity in the banking sector on the whole increased. This is in the bank with the foreign capital, and for the first time since 1914, these are banks, they have netto credit share increase, and this is a positive sign. And also those banks that have healthy business model, these are French banks, Austrian banks, they were the first who felt positive changes. I'm far from optimism that crediting will be restored in the first quarter of 2017. This is a slow process, and they are delayed because the banking system consists of two subsystems. These are foreign and state banks, and from the other side, private banks with Ukrainian capital. Many of them, they attract resources at 22-25 rate, and there are such banks in the market. So the crisis in the banking sphere is not over, but there are some trends and positive changes. And there are artificial factors. If we compare it with the previous year, the number of banks with that are in the negative, they decreased, and these banks are the clients of fund guarantee funds, and so there are formal indicators for this, and also there is an interest, and you can see it through the media and the activity that is reflected in quarterly reports. The crediting of population, and this is the indicator that shows that there are some prospects in the area. Now, concerning the risks the system faces, I believe that the recipes, the National Bank decreases the rates too fast, and liberalize the monetary policy because the risks that economy faces are too big. And we have a small open economy. We are dependent on foreign markets. We depend on fluctuations of prices on grain, on ferrous, on metals. So these markets are not stable. Second, we depend, as all developing markets, on rates, and we know that there are they can change, and it will affect negatively on Pakistan, India, Ukraine, Brasilia. So there's no difference. So this is a trans-border risk that should be taken into account. And also force majeure, for example, the change of power in the United States, and the change of the situation, and also our delay in the work according to the schedule of IMF, and also political risks, military risks, because investors and those people who take economic decisions, they also wait for the news from the front line, and this is also important. To counteract these risks is important, and the government should pay more attention to the liberalization of monetary policy, and that the decrease of rates and credit is good for economy, but at the same time it's not good for banks. As Tymofiy mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, there are banks that they have 50% of problematic credits, and when our foreign partners come here, those who invest in bonds or some analysts from European states come here to Ukraine, they are shocked by our statistics. They ask, how can this bank work if they have 70% of bad credits? And we explain that the system works, and those who have 30 or 50% of bad credits, they even manage to earn and be operationally profitable because the rates are really high, and efficient rate on consumer credits, it can reach up to 120% yearly, and even a half portfolio is written off, so the profit will cover all this. The rates at the wild markets that are non-bank markets, or even those banks who credit population on hidden rates, they establish 0, but they have about 100% in reality. So the government should work more with this segment of the market. It should be regulated, and we should work with it more. As concerning business crediting, so the rates are lower. It's about 18 rate and 18% rate. So those figures on the net profit and the limitation of the number of insolvent banks, it shows that only in the third quarter the banks got the opportunity to earn, and not everyone felt it. And we should understand that banking is not charity. This is a business of stakeholders who brought here their subsidiaries. They wait that they start to earn. That's why the decision of executive power through the vertical, and also the decisions connected with the policies and procedures of the National Bank, they should take into account the factor that bankers wait for the opportunity to earn. And we may say that their appetites can be reduced, but there should be balance of interests. And we can now see it at the end of the year.
Thank you, colleagues, for inviting me here. I will not exactly agree with Maria that the President Poroshenko is the main populist. In her understanding, after the draft law of the on Mikhailovsky Bank, that was presidential draft law, and I do not agree with Tymofiy Mylovanov that the problems of Trump will be the main ones, and military problems will be the main ones for the next year. We've been talking about military problems for banking system for 3 years, starting from the loss of Crimea, the problems of large borrowers who are behind the front line. The banks got adapted to this situation. I see risks in somewhat different. The main risk is internal. The system is being cleaned for the 3rd year. Now the system says that the system is being cleaned out for new players who will come next year. They will be waiting for 2018. When the upward movement will become more sustainable, and who will stay in the market, whether they will be ready to provide loans for the growth, which will be bigger next year than this year. These are the main challenges. The inflation, I expect that it will be according to the targets of the National Bank of Ukraine. I have always been criticizing the targeted inflation, but the indicators of 2015, whether the policy was right or wrong, this will be the subject for expert investigation. I see the third systemic risk is possible nationalization of bank number one. In 2017, Maria can confirm that the quotings of foreign securities give not very positive signals, and the market is always right. Whatever we say, but the rates are formed by the market. Another risk is privatization of a shut bank, which is mentioned as the fact that has already taken place. We understand that dozens of millions of Ukrainians to which a shut bank has tens of billions of commitments, but no one has taken them out from the shut bank. I have been the client of a shut bank since 1985. Many lost savings in 1991, but no one took these commitments from the shut bank. And will a new foreign investor take all these commitments? There's no answer to this question. Whether will there be claims to a new investor? The people received 1,000, but since then there were no more payments made, and also there is an issue with the debt of Внешэконом Bank of the USSR and Web of Russian Federation and Prominvest Bank of Ukraine here have inherited this huge dollar debt, which is hundreds of millions, taking into account the interest. And we see the second risk, which can be implemented as the crisis scenario. The main risk, which is not banking risk, could be possible passing of populist draft laws. Like the next one was the draft law of the opposition bloc on increasing the guarantees of deposits to increase from 200,000 to 1 million. Myself, as the representative of Ukrainian patriots, I believe this is a lot. Opposition bloc did not make calculations. Our calculations show that it should be increased up to 500,000. There are very populistic draft laws which might be passed next year, and that is an expansion of the requirements to the Council of the National Bank. I don't support that. But the draft law 52 52, 56, 52, 57 on the National Bank and the Fund of Guaranteeing Deposits. I believe that most of the bankers did not read these drafts, and I believe that the MPs in 2015, when they were voting for amendments to the law on the National Bank, now the bank is independent, and it's not the National Bank, it became the central bank. If these draft laws are not passed on nationalization of the National Bank,
В плане нашей сегодня брифинга не сказали. Поэтому...
what do our forecasts say? If we do not change the mandate of the National Bank, this will be a side trend, insignificant growth, like Professor Yuriy said last year. 2% growth for Ukraine will be super successful scenario. We need 8-10%. For that, we need to change the functions of the National Bank and to create the banks which will not be commercial banks, export crediting agency, and in 2018 we believe that we will need to launch something similar to American service for support of small business, which will not be the bank, but which will make cheaper the segment which could be not oligarchic.
И сказать про валюту. 27,2, который там заложен в бюджет.
27.2 is the exchange rate which is included into the budget. Is based on big successes of privatization. We've been waiting for these successes for 3 years. There are no successes.
Те аналитики, которые говорили про 25, что все приватизация ОПЗ, облэнерго, поступление всех траншев, недостаточно хорошо работает как Минфин, Нацбанк, так и в целом Кабмин по привлечению траншей. То есть нам рассказывали, что будет там 15-17 миллиардов, плюс план Маршалла, о котором почему-то мы уже 1,5 года перестали говорить, но который тоже был нам после революции, в принципе, обещан на официальном уровне. И теперь, если макрофинансовая допомога в 600 миллионов...
With macrofinancial assistance, which is 600 million.
Сказала, что лес надо отдавать, ну, дороже надо отдавать. И говорит, что тогда каждый год нужно за лес доплачивать. И это будет таким дополнительным стимулом, как раз и, может быть, эти поступления, которые будут, если их правительство добьется вместе с Национальным банком, и заложить основой, как уставные фонды для тех институтов развитку, которые будут созданы в следующем и в позаследующем году. Спасибо.
Спасибо вам. Как мы дальше?
So what do we do next? We have about 10 minutes. We can discuss it and talk about that. Very briefly. I will not be commenting populism. I did not call the president the main populist. I have a big list. What I want to comment, guarantee. How was it happening all over the world? The World Bank was looking at dozens of countries who were passing through this transformation period. We we are now surviving the same experience. Guaranteeing creates the moral hazard. People go, bring money to bank at a very high rate. They don't think that the bank may have high credit risk, that they may lose this money. They know that the state guarantees. Without then, running banks, if there is a big threat, if deposits are not guaranteed, people run to the bank, and this is in crowds, and that is the task of the state to balance these two things. In Ukraine, we need to increase the sum of guarantee, not to 1 million, but we need to stop guaranteeing the interest. This will reduce the moral risk and will ensure that running banks are balanced. The specific laws, I read about them, and I will comment on that next time. But they partially have the commitments to take the credits of refinancing from National Bank to save zombie banks. This law is to be read very attentively. Not everything is so simple there. And one more comment on making loans cheaper by state guarantees. My friend works in the Ministry of Finance, and she says how the state guarantees work. They pay 0% of borrowers pay on these loans. 100% of these loans are non-performing loans, and 20-30% of borrowers cannot find what's happening. And state guarantees is not the best option. Thank you.
My opinion, I agree with Marian. I agree that we should reject moral hazard, and as other countries, we should establish the percentage, what percent we are going to guarantee. For example, 35, 22. So this is this normal percent or not? And as Vitaliy said, if we had a key rate of refinancing as a cost of money in the economy, then we would correlate it with the rate of financing. And if it is more, then it is not guaranteed. Another approach, if the rate is too high, it should be taxed by fiscal measures, and a second approach to guarantee only deposits in hryvnia, because we print only national currency hryvnias. Why should we guarantee deposits in foreign currency? Once Mr. Yuriy said that full currency liberalization means that that will be like in China. There won't be free circulation of dollars and euros. So then there should be a system, banking system, people trust. And those declarations, you may see that there is different sorts of banks in different sectors that are not created, because the banking sector does not generate this white margin that allows them to work, because there are shadow sectors, and we understand that shadow crediting through financial companies and in black market, it will be big problem in 2017 and 2018. And also I would like to say that we need a complex approach as with the issues of there should be changes introduced into legislation concerning deposit guarantee fund, and we have different types of banks that are the foreign banks and the share of banks that are Ukrainian banks. We should analyze the situation, and we may then see whether the rates will go down, because I worked in this banking sphere for many years, and I see that if you see the structure, so the trade development and construction. Now construction is on the rise according to official indicators, and everything else is in stagnation, and shadow economy provides we have only two instruments, so deposits and property. So insurance market and stock exchange are not developed. So if these markets, they should be restarted according to European rules and regulations. And if we broaden the spectrum of proposals that are interested to Ukrainian citizens, then maybe people won't save their money under the pillow, and you know that the crime is on the rise. And in such case, people will bring money to the banks, and I do not support the cancellation of guaranteeing the deposits. So we need more market institutions, market-based decisions, and these state guarantees and banks of development. This is good idea, and they work in Asia and in the United States and in the European Union, but in our conditions we need, if market needs them, so it should create them, and maybe state should participate in the process, but we should not wait until there is money in the budget for such projects, knowing from previous experience that state guarantees failed, and seeing the situation that is in Ukr-Exim and a little bit in a Shad Bank, we should say that for the last 3 years the state is a bad banker. And maybe positive example, only Ukrgazbank. Others, there is no success. And each year we ask, not we, but they come and ask for money. So if they won't ask, maybe we maybe several banks of developments would rise. But the practice shows that the rates that are in the market rates, if we lower them, there will be more people who want to get loans and will pay, and there will be, but it should be done by market measures, not just increase the money in the circulation or through administration, as in one eastern country, you know, that is neighboring us. The president just tells the bankers what rates should be. So these methods are not appropriate. We should work in order to, by market measures, to make conditions in the crediting system more favorable. I will be brief. And this is, I would like to say that we have different opinions, but we find common grounds. There are risks, and the system is weak, and I believe in market, but I lived in the United States. There are a lot of aggressive support in strategic areas. And what I see in Ukraine is that people, and I'm concerned of this, at the level of implementation of the ideas, we see people, I see people who know what area should be developed, but they cannot use even a smartphone. Even my father and grandfather can, but these people, they choose the industry. I'm not against this, but I am against that these people will choose the industry. And one person comes and his ideas are obsolete. He says the things he said 20 years ago. And we see the results of these conversations. So I went 20 years ago, and heads of economic institutions were the same as they are today. I came here 20 years after, and I see that the heads of university had such as rectors, that they are the same. So they develop economic ideas in the countries, and now they say something. So when there is Yanukovych, they say one thing. When there is Tymoshenko, they say other things. So we should build a strong state, and this is our task. And despite our differences, we should find common grounds, because otherwise there will be misunderstanding. And based on data, based on coalition, we should get united. So we have differences, but we should find our common ground, and otherwise we would just go in circles, and in 20 years there will be the same people again. And I agree that the market is important and the economy should be restarted, and I believe that this is a long-term process, and I don't say about National Bank, I will say about the banks. So the bankers say they have liquidity, but we do not have anywhere to put the money in. So they say that they cannot provide credits because no one wants to take them. But there is small and medium-sized business, and these businesses, they all in shadow, and persons from one bank, they say that we can provide the loans to 14%, but I won't give this because they are all individual entrepreneurs. Even if they are not individual entrepreneurs, you cannot create in one day a department that would develop the economic models and provide understanding. So some banks, half of banks, they just work on trust connected with inside information. They know what will be. Foreign banks, they provide only to those if the situation is clear. So we should build financial system that will correspond economic situation, and that will identify the products that will yield results. So the bankers, they are conservative, or they just have insider information, and this is the problem that can be solved in one day. So this is my comment. So we have only 2 minutes left. I will be brief. I believe that we should have full restart, and we have this old system that is obsolete now. And the last crisis, it has two components. One is devaluation, and we have such a situation in the system. no country would succeed in such a situation. Even our German colleagues would say that their model won't be able to survive this, so it will be difficult for them to do this. And when they allowed crediting of population, there was a bomb that exploded and damaged the banking system. They said that this is not organic, it is growing exponentially, and there was a risk. And Stelmach said once or twice that it will lead to unpredictable results. And foreign banks that came here, they didn't teach us European culture. They just adapted our situation. They saw that you can make 20% a year, and this is what, like in Karl Marx theory. So they were ready to work in these conditions, and I believe that when the head of the National Bank will come and the Prime Minister, and they will say, starting tomorrow, no bank will fall. And there will be a consensus that banks should pay and return, and everyone else has no zombie and some laundry of bombs that can explode. And then we will be able to overcome devaluation processes. So now I just cannot restart our system from inside. That's why I believe we should continue to cooperate with the International Monetary Fund, because under these conditions, the condition of war, we do not have other alternatives. But we should understand what are our prospects when our situation is improved, when there will be a 3-5% guarantee that won't work, but everyone else will work as in other countries of the world. Sovereignty of the country is the sovereignty, and that is of importance. I want to say that in 2017 we should revise banking sector, its attractiveness for investment, because my colleague said that we have the highest rates in Europe, but maybe even in Eurasia, and this is beneficial for the banking sector concerning investment attractiveness, but stagnation in the economy and military risks, they threaten the investors, and some minor banks for corporate business, and there should be a situation like in 2006 when big players came here. And I believe that when we have a big player from the United States or from Europe, if they come here, so it will be a good sign, the restart. So we should use the world market that is developed, not just try to invent our own Ukrainian bike. We should take good system and use it, because otherwise we won't succeed. We should just take their models and implement them here. The same about the bank. So we should use their banking methods, and how to, we should understand that printed hryvnia goes to currency market, and those investments that can be realized. You know that this hryvnia just goes to the currency exchange market and reduces the rate of hryvnia further. Thank you very much for this fruitful discussion.